Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for this Ontario Public Works Connects webinar. Today's webinar is titled Construction Dispute Resolution: Is Utilizing a Project Referee the Answer? My name is Enrico Stradiotto, and I work with the Ontario Concrete Pipe Association, and I will be your host for today. Before we get started, I just want to take some time to talk a little bit about OPWA. The Ontario Public Works Association is a non-for-profit organization representing public works across Ontario. The OPWA chapter is one of 63 chapters of the American Public Works Association. We have well over 500 members with the OPWA, including municipalities, provincial representatives, consultants, utility contractors, suppliers, and many more. To help support the chapter, we also have two regional branches. The West Central branch, which is located in Southwest Ontario, and the Ottawa Valley branch located up in Eastern Ontario. So the mission statement of the OPWA is connecting the public works community. So why be a member of OPWA if you're not already? Well, it's about the large membership of fellow peer OPWA public works professionals, as well as the greater North American public works group of APWA. We have 9 committees that might of interest you in terms of your skill set. So we'd love to have you as part of OPWA to help to contribute to the many events that we have. We hold several events throughout the year, many of which include networking. So again, a chance to network with your cohorts and those in the industry. We have different events that honor members and public works professionals in the industry, as well as many educational events like today's webinar. And of course, we do include sponsorship to help recognize your organization as part of OPWA. So if any of that interests you, feel free to contact us at the website shown there, ontarioapwa.org. And of course, on the right-hand side, you can see the many committees that are part of OPWA. So just to give you a sneak peek into the upcoming webinars that we're going to be hosting, these webinars are hosted by the Education Committee of OPWA. So you're twice blessed in the month of April. We have 2 topics. On April 8th, we have Construction Law Update, Navigating the Latest Developments and Trends. And then on April 23rd, Trees and Construction, Designing and Implementing Projects while Respecting Tree Resources. And of course, if you might have a topic that you feel would be of interest to our membership, then we certainly ask you to submit your topic to the Education Committee, and we'd love to review it and give you that opportunity to speak to our membership and others that join us throughout these webinars month to month. Just another peek into the upcoming events over the next 3 months. Our premier event is that of the National Public Works Week, which is actually a week honoring and recognizing public works across North America. So all chapters of APWA do host different events, and certainly here in Ontario, your local public works departments will probably have events of their own. So keep your eyes and ears open for local events related to public works. Of course, May 22nd is our annual awards luncheon. This is an opportunity to recognize individuals and projects for their excellence in public works. Now, I know the submission deadline was extended to March 28th, and I know that's only a couple days away, but we have revamped the submission process to make it much easier and efficient to make submissions. So maybe you have an individual in your organization or a project that you feel is worthy of being considered. So please make that submission before Friday's deadline. And of course, as we get into the sunny days of summer, we will have our OPWA Golf Day. We could probably expect information to come forward about a month out from that date. So today's webinar is on the Zoom format, and as many of you know, your microphones have been muted and your cameras have been turned off. As much as the information being presented is a worthy part of this webinar, so are your questions. And we'd like to address those questions at the conclusion of today's webinar. So what we ask you to do is put your questions into our Q&A box. That Q&A box can be found at the bottom of your screen. Just take your cursor to the lower part of your screen and you'll see the toolbar within Zoom. You'll see an icon that says Q&A. And click on it and enter as many questions as you may like. And again, we will address those questions with Rick at the conclusion of his presentation today. So today's webinar is a duration of 1 hour. At this time, I'd like to introduce our presenter. His name is Rick Tokeno, and he's a certified adjudicator. At this time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask Rick to get his screen set up with the presentation. In the meantime, I'll take just a couple minutes here to introduce Rick. Rick Tokeno is a professional engineer with over 40 years of experience in the management and delivery of infrastructure projects. Currently, Rick is a certified adjudicator for construction industry disputes in Ontario through ODAC and federally across Canada through CANDAC. Rick worked for Ontario municipalities for approximately 20 years, 13 years for a national railway in Canada, and 7 years in the consulting industry. Career highlights include role as a construction engineer in Eastern Canada for CN Rail, principal engineer for the Union Station Revitalization Project in Toronto, and a city engineer, director of engineering for the city of Guelph. With that, I would now like to hand things over to Rick, and everything looks great, Rick, so take it away.
Thanks, Enrico. Hopefully everything's working fine for everybody here from a technology point of view. This is a different format for me in the sense that I can't see who I'm talking to. I can't see reactions, and so it makes things a little bit challenging to know whether people are falling asleep or scowling at me or whatever. So this makes things a little bit more challenging, but it's good. Anyway, good afternoon. Thanks for attending this session, and thanks to the OPWA Education Committee for giving me the opportunity to speak about construction dispute resolution options with a focus on the project referee option. First slide, I'll give you a little bit brief presentation of overview of what I'm going to be talking about. I'll go over the disputes and what's the current suite of commonly used dispute resolution options. Talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of each. Then I'll go into the option of which is the topic of this session, which is to talk about the details of the project referee. I'd give you some advantages and disadvantages of this option and what types of projects that it might be best suited for. And answer the question, is using the project referee the answer? So, and of course, we should have time for some Q&A at the end of the day, at the end of the presentation. So let's talk about construction disputes. You know, guessing most of you have them. I'm not sure I've heard of very many that don't have disputes. Most, if not all, construction contracts have some level of construction disputes. How you deal with them effectively is important to the overall success of your project, both financially, professionally, in the eyes of your bosses, politicians, and the public. I'm sure you're all familiar with the current dispute resolution processes in OPSS or in your special provisions or in CCDC if you're using that form of contract for some of your facilities work. So talk a little bit about minimizing disputes and are you satisfied? Well, I'm assuming if you're fully satisfied with your current dispute resolution processes, you probably wouldn't be participating in this webinar. But I do wish to speak a little bit about construction dispute avoidance, which is ultimately the best way to deal with construction disputes. Eliminate the cause of them before they start, before you start. Get your stuff together before you go out for tender. Everybody is under pressure now to get things out the door for tenders, and the overall quality of issued for tender documents coming out of the market is not as good as it should be. Start from the basics. Choose the right consultant for your project. Choose the right procurement model for your project. Choose the right contract form for your project. And then staff your project with skilled people, especially on critical and complex projects. Honestly, I believe there's a shortage of good designers and specification writers in the industry. Internally, most municipalities no longer have staff to adequately question or review a design submission or tender documentation with an eye to catch the issues that contractors will find either at tender or during construction. Do yourselves a favor, hire an independent third-party review to do your to review your design and construction drawings before they go out for tender. Just adding this step and telling your consultant that you will be doing this step will improve the diligence of the consultant and their deliverable. You know that fixing an issue during construction will likely cost you multiple times more than fixing it prior to issuing the document. Also, it's worth noting that a good set of construction drawings will attract more contractors who wish to work with a municipality or with a client or an owner, and it enhances your reputation within the industry. Good contracts attract good contractors. Bad contracts will attract the bad players in the industry. Sorry for the bit of the rant, but I think it's important to recognize that prevention is the best way to deal with construction disputes. But recognizing that there will be disputes, and everybody knows that. No contract is perfect, no owner is perfect, no the consultant is perfect, and no contractor is perfect. So once you have a dispute, there's multiple ways you can address it. And option one is always the best. It's always should be the first option and the best option. You stay in control of the process, and the people who know the most about the project are the ones involved in sorting the dispute out. It may feel sometimes that you want to do something more formal, but you need to understand the negotiating advantage that you may have at that time as the owner. Most contractors are not really interested in prolonging the dispute. They want to move on with construction. They want to resolve the dispute and move on. This gives the municipality or the owner a bit of negotiating advantage at this point. That doesn't mean it will get solved, and it can get ugly and personal, but if you navigate this step successfully, it's still the best way. So again, from an advantages point of view, it's simple, it's cost effective. You don't need lawyers involved. The people involved are the people that know the project best. And there's no fixed timelines and deadlines that people need to work on. Of course, the flip side of that is with no fixed timelines, it can drag on, and sometimes it's purposely dragged on by one party or the other. It can also get a little bit too personal sometimes, especially if somebody's wanting to defend their design or try to explain that to the other party. So it can get a bit personal, and negotiating a settlement to a dispute through direct negotiation, you sometimes have a little bit more work to do to get to buy in or to your senior management in your team there to buy in on a negotiated result. So that's option one. Mediation is the second option. It's an option if the direct negotiation doesn't resolve the dispute. Just remember, the mediator is not interested in what's in the contract. Their job is just to work both parties into a position where they agree to a resolution of the dispute. They are, however, impartial, which is helpful. So it's nice to have that extra step there before you go on to arbitration litigations. Usually that doesn't take long if both parties agree. Usually, unless it's massive, it's usually a 1-day mediation or even half-day mediation. It maintains each party's control over the final decision. You have some timelines, and the format of this is included in most contracts in some form. And the parties do need to agree on a mediator. Disadvantages, there's no really guarantee of an agreement. It's not binding. It requires the willingness of both parties to come to an agreement. If they're not really wishing to solve it, then the mediation is kind of a waste of a time. And you have to remember that the mediator's role is not related to the contract. They don't care what's in the contract. Good mediators will look for the weakest party and will mostly pick out a municipality as it has the deepest pockets and will push the municipality towards a resolution that you may not think is acceptable. My suggestion is you develop your strategy before you go into the mediation and stick to it. You can bend, but don't break. Keep your bottom line position intact. Beyond mediation, arbitration's the next one that's in a lot of contracts. It should be cheaper and quicker than litigation, but right now I'm hearing that some of the top arbitrators are now booking more than a year in the future. So that quick comment may not be applicable anymore for if you want to get the arbitrator that you're looking for. It does remain an option, but when lawyers and arbitrators get involved, it's likely to get more time consuming and expensive. This is no longer as good an option as before, as it's becoming more and more like a litigation as to how it's being handled and how it feels to the party. Still better than litigation, I think, in many ways, but educate yourself on the process before you go there. So again, there's defined rules. It's binding on both parties. It should be cheaper and quicker. You can agree on an arbitrator that has experience in your type of construction and contract. It is confidential. Disadvantages, once you're there, there's quite often a lot of limits to your appeals to the decision. You're more likely going to require legal representation, so it can become expensive, and there's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with an arbitration process. Adjudication. I'm an adjudicator here for now over 5 years. I can kind of speak to this with some level of experience. So it came into effect over 5 years ago. It's slowly gained momentum, and the number of issues going to adjudication has increased substantially in the past 2 years. Also, the values of the disputes have gone up significantly in the past couple of years. I'm not sure how many of you have seen an adjudication on your project. I normally ask you to put your hands up, but that's not going to work today. There are pros and cons to an adjudication, but if you can avoid some of the disadvantages, it can be a useful tool in your toolbox. It is really set up as what I'll call rough justice, and it is interim, as both parties retain their rights to pursue the dispute further through other legal challenges. One of the challenges is to get an adjudicator that has experience in the area of the dispute. I gave a presentation in 2019 when adjudication just came out, or shortly after that, to the Ontario Bar Association. When they asked me to participate to supply my opinion from an engineer's perspective. And what I said then, I think, is still appropriate. You need to agree on an adjudicator that understands your dispute. If it's strictly a legal principle or a legal interpretation issue, just pick a lawyer. If it's a technical issue, pick an engineer or somebody with technical expertise. If it's a quantity survey issue, pick a quantity surveyor. Look at the registry and suggest one that would seem to fit the dispute. Because if it's a complex scheduling issue or it's a metallurgical properties associated with a welded joint, I'm thinking that that's probably not a good one for a lawyer to be your adjudicator. And the way the system works, if you don't agree with the other party to the adjudicator, UDAC will appoint one from the roster without regard to the specific experience as it relates to this dispute. So you could have a highly technical issue and you may end up with a lawyer or somebody else that's an accountant, for instance. So just be careful when you're doing that so that you can be aware of what's going on there. CANDAC, which is the federal adjudication process, is doing this differently, where they have a committee and they'll look at the nature of the dispute and they will assign the adjudicator based on the dispute, the nature of the dispute in question. Don't want to spend too much more time on the adjudication, but I do want to mention something that there's been Bill 216 was approved. It makes a bunch of changes to adjudication and other items. And it was passed last fall in, I think, record time from the time the bill was introduced to the time it was read into law was possibly less than 2 weeks. Anyway, but it's not in, it came into law, but it's not, it needs to be proclaimed by the Lieutenant Governor. So it's not the law of the land yet, but just so you're aware of what's going on, there's issues with deeming of proper invoices, which has been a bone of contention through the first 5 years. They're expanding the scope of adjudication to include more types of disputes than were allowed for under the original act. They're extending the adjudication period for 90 days from the date the contract is completed, because there was a lot of issues with respect to, for the first 5 years, about when adjudication was available. They're now going to allow private adjudicators, which is going to be an interesting dynamic that I'll talk a little bit more about later. Jurisdiction is now a bigger issue with respect to how it gets dealt with. There's some revised wording on costs. The time to pay for an adjudication reward has now been increased from 10 to 15 days. There's also a mandatory annual release of holdback. So there's a new section that's been added requiring an owner to release accumulated holdback to the contractor annually. So that might be something that, if you're not aware of it, there's something new happening there. There's also a publication of a notice of termination that's required. So anyway, sorry, probably spent a little bit too much more time, but the main disadvantage, it's cost effective and time inefficient. It's a court enforceable decision. It gives you internal justification if payments required to be paid within 10 or 15 days. I don't think anybody in accounting or accounts payable is going to argue with you. You have basically a court enforceable order that requires you to pay. Biggest issue really is there were some restrictions on single matters. There was opportunities for contractors to ambush people. There was a completion issue, which I think it's being resolved in the changes. And then if you don't agree on an adjudicator, the ODAC will appoint one, which I think could be a problem if you end up with somebody, not that they're not qualified as adjudicators, but they may not have a lot of experience in the area of your concern. Litigation, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. You know, it's ugly. It's not fun if you've ever been through a discovery process and been discovered by lawyers. I spent 3 days being interrogated, and it's probably the least favorite 3 days of my entire career. So anyway, it's got its place. Sometimes there is no choice. Lawyers, you get a fair hearing in front of a judge. You can settle right up to the time you're into court. So, but it's expensive, and one of the disadvantages is you may end up with a judge, not you probably will end up with a judge who has really no expertise in technical construction issues, which are sometimes pretty relevant. So project referee, what is it? Project referee is, just let me move something here on my screen here, provides the project with a contractually engaged, qualified, independent, unbiased third party to review a dispute and provide a rational and informed recommendation with respect to the dispute to facilitate an agreement between the parties. So basically, the parties agree as part of the construction contract how the referee process will work. The parties then need to come to an agreement within a short period of time at the beginning of the contract on the who the project referee will be. Having this extra step in place can often allow the parties to rationalize their positions before taking further action and escalation of a dispute. And it gives the parties a bit of breathing space to consider their positions in light of an independent third-party opinion in the dispute. So how does it work? The dispute resolution process is actually documented in the contract, so contractors who are bidding the thing know how the referee process will work and where it fits in with the overall framework of the dispute resolution process that's in your contract. The referee is appointed at the initiation of the contract prior to any disputes. So the referee is in at the beginning, and you may not use him or her, but you have to have that person in place at the beginning. And how does the referee typically get involved in the process? There's a dispute notice of some sort through the overall dispute resolution process that's in the contract. One dispute notice is issued, the other party responds, and then the dispute goes to some sort of a steering committee of senior management from both the contractor, the owner, and those parties sit down. Call it a committee, call it a working group, whatever you want. They sit down and they say, hey guys, okay, I see your dispute. We're one step above the fray. Are we going to be able to solve this? Yes or no? And, you should be able to sign it, or it could be solved. But if it's not, either party can then have the dispute referred to the project referee for review. So then the project review will review the dispute, provides a written recommendation, and the parties can then choose to, they get to review, and of course they can either accept the recommendation of the referee, or they continue down the path of mediation, arbitration, litigation, whatever else is within the contract. There are other similar initiatives in the industry. Dispute resolution boards are something we're seeing more and more of. You might have heard of Project Umpire, which basically is similar, but it stays up to date with the project's progress and is involved more in a day-to-day. Project Reference, Project Referee, all are kind of on the same general premise that you just want somebody, how they integrate into the dispute resolution process is different in each one, but at least you're basically, the underlying principle is that you've got a third party working to provide an extra opinion in the process. I'm stuck here for a second. Just try to get, there we go. So what's the referee process once the referees gets involved? What should you expect? The referee can conduct the review of the dispute in the manner that the referee decides. So there's no prescriptive methodology in the contract about how this is done. The referee decides how best to review and render a decision with respect to the dispute. The parties are required to cooperate with the referee and provide the information as requested and required by the referee. The referee may retain another person with specialized knowledge. For instance, if there's a complex scheduling exercise that needs to be done, that the project referee doesn't have that type of specialized experience, can actually retain somebody else to assist. This review, in addition to the document, it can include site inspections and discussions with personnel involved. There's a little caution to go with that. It's difficult to navigate. You pretty much need to have personnel from both sides involved in the discussion rather than hearing it from one side or another. You need to have a little bit of a balanced issue with respect to when you're having direct discussions with any parties involved. Time is really limited. In the one that I'm involved in, the time is 10 days from the time of initiation till the time of a written recommendation. Of course, it's not binding, as I've said already, and the referee is not permitted to participate or represent in further legal proceedings if it goes down that way. So what else to expect, I guess? If you have a dispute resolution process documented in your contract, and you wish to retain a referee, there's going to be a project referee agreement that's going to be signed between the three parties. The cost of the referee services is split 50-50 between the owner and the contractor. Once that three-party agreement has been signed, one party cannot unilaterally decide to change the project referees. So if the owner is not happy with the decisions, they can't unilaterally change the referee. In a similar manner, if the contractor doesn't like the project referee's decisions, they can't say, yeah, no, we'd like to change the referee. So it's basically you're locked in. Once the agreement is signed, you go from there, and you can't make that change. And it's typically an hourly fee plus a nominal monthly fee as a retainer to keep them on staff. So following the similar pattern that I've used on previous slides for other dispute resolution processes, there are advantages and disadvantages of project referee. The advantage is you're actually selecting somebody who's experienced and qualified and respected for your project. So if you got a bridge project, you want to agree on a project referee that's got experience in building bridges. If you're doing an underground infrastructure, you want to have somebody who's doing that, who's had a lot of experience in that. And you're doing a building, then you want to have a project referee that has experience in building buildings. So basically, it's the advantage is you're actually going to end up with somebody who's going to be looking at your dispute from a perspective of somebody who's experienced in the field of your project. And what it does, it gives parties an independent, unbiased recommendation on the dispute. It's an extra set of eyes that come in and say, hey guys, I'm looked at this and here's the situation. I've reviewed it and I think party A or party B is correct or something in between. And this is where I think this would resolve. One of the advantages that as an adjudicator using this is because I'm often involved in some of these disputes that later in the formal adjudication process. The decision or the recommendation that comes from an adjudicator / project referee should hold a little bit more weight in terms of ultimately if you do end up in arbitration or litigation or adjudication, you're likely going to see something similar. It's really, it's the recommendations there to provide both parties with facilitating a resolution to the dispute. It's a quick value-added step prior to litigation or mediation or anything else. It's really cost-effective. It's time efficient, and a referee looks at the disputes and decides what's the most suitable way to get to the bottom of it and provide a recommendation. It is without prejudice, and it's a confidential process. Disadvantage, of course, is that's not binding on either party. Either party can then say, "Hey, I didn't like the decision. I'm gonna move to mediation or adjudication or litigation." And the time limitations that are in some of the contracts here are like at 10 days or something. It's unreasonable for complex disputes, but that can be waived by either party. It all it requires is that the parties to agree to a new time frame. So what types of projects would a project referee be best suited to? Quite honestly, it doesn't make sense for all of the projects. But if you have a higher profile, longer duration, or high risk project, you should consider adding this to your contract to give you another simple dispute resolution tool that should be effective in facilitating agreement between yourself and the contractor. Keep in mind that if you are an owner, and that sometimes the consultant will need to protect and defend their design, and it may be a good idea to get an independent third-party opinion about the dispute. Also, if you've got PMs on your project that may not be fully experienced, this actually provides them with a learning opportunity to develop their skills for dealing with disputes in the future. So again, summarizing, if you've got a 6-month or 3-month project, don't bother. It's an extra step you don't need to do. Longer duration, high value projects that have a high risk profile for significant change. If you're not 100% comfortable with where your design is, and you've got to move forward, and you're not really happy necessarily with your design that you're putting out for tender, and you recognize that you're going to have chance for change, like, again, might be an opportunity to incorporate this into the process to basically try to simplify and get an extra opinion thrown in there. You can do it without a project referee agreement, but this makes it a lot quicker because you actually have a referee that's scoped within your document and understands what his obligations or her obligations are under the contract. If you got something, again, that's technically complex, might be something that you would consider. If it's a highly political project or in the public spotlight, it could be a smaller value, but a high profile thing in front of the mayor's house or in the downtown business district or something like that. You might want to think about incorporating something like that. Also could be driven by senior management that wishes to have an independent, unbiased, informed opinion on disputes. Again, for complex, higher value projects with higher profile, the senior management might want to say, "Hey, not that I don't agree with everything that you do, but I just want to keep this on track and make sure we have an opportunity to bring in an informed opinion, third-party opinion at some point if there's a dispute, and deal with it that way." Also, where if you've got projects where unresolved disputes can have significant potential for negative financial and schedule impacts. So it's a tool that you can use to kind of move forward and allows you to there's no such thing as eliminating disputes, but it certainly gives you another tool here to use in the event that you feel that in your specific project that it might provide value in having an extra person involved. So who's using the project referee process? City of Toronto, the Gardner Expressway Rehabilitation Project, which is the one I'm working on right now. The MTO have used under their OPSS Prov 100, their GC 31413. They had a referee and a referee panel within that document. It was a referee for disputes under 750,000, referee panel of 3 for larger ones. But they were enacted in a manner where they they were only brought on in the event of a dispute. They've actually moved away a bit from this. I don't have a great feel for exactly why they've gone away from that process, but I think there was some concerns from the contracting side about the way it was being administered. It's also got an interesting aspect where it's provisionally binding. So if you invoke the referee process, it becomes the result, the recommendation of the project referee is provisionally binding until the end of the project. So I think there was some uncomfort on the side of the contractors going down this process and then having their hands tied until the end. I think there's a fair amount of bureaucracy. It's also got an uncertainty as it could be triggered at any time in their process, and they have 3 different levels of claims dispute process. And I think the other issue is the introduction of private adjudicators and the ability of the contractor to basically step outside of the contract, for lack of a better term, and initiated an adjudication at any point. They could do that, which basically creates another variable. So anyway, I'm just going to summarize. I'm not sure other municipalities are using it. I understand there's a few that may be using it in the future. It's just another tool, and I've always been a firm believer that a lot of people pick up forms of contracts as the flavor of the month, whether it's design, bid, build, project, design, build, IPD, whatever. There's all kinds of things that people, P3s, and it all seems to be turning into what I'll call a flavor of the month, and people use it without understanding what's going on. So project referee is not a be all and end all. It is, I believe, it has a place in your toolbox on specific projects. I think it's worthy of consideration. So in that, I'll answer is using a project referee the answer. And the answer is sometimes, and it depends. With that, I will finish my presentation. Thanks very much for your attention, and look forward to some questions if there are any.
Hey, Rick, great job, great presentation, lots of good information. Yeah, we were able to get a few questions coming in, and at this time I would invite the rest of the attendees to send us additional questions that we can address here. We've got at least 14 minutes worth, so we can get a lot of discussion in as we go. So let's get started. Rick, if you're ready to go, I'm
Yep.
going to jump down to a question by John Doe's. And the question is, how confidential is the process? Should the project referee process fail and the dispute goes to litigation, would not the records created through the dispute resolution be discoverable?
Good question, John. And I'm looking for the specific wording here in my document here, but it is confidential and is without prejudice, and they cannot, they can produce the recommendation or the review. It can be produced in a litigation, but it's not taken as a decision because it's non-binding. So basically, it can be used as I'll call it a reference document, but it can't. It's not. I guess it's not binding. It's not necessarily a document that can be used, or it won't prejudice your case, I guess, when you go to litigation. But the parties can produce the result or the review report. So, uh, but it doesn't. According to the agreement I have signed, what on ones that I would do, I would. I have written into the agreement I would destroy all my records immediately following the rendering of this of the decision and the recommendation, and that way the records are not discoverable because there are no records, and that way the review and the recommendation stands and can be used by other parties. But all of the background that goes into it and any discussions and notes and everything else are not available for use by either party during further legal proceedings. Hopefully I answered that for you, John.
Okay, Rick. So we've got a few more coming in, so maybe I'll just ask you to kind of keep some responses short,
I'll
just
try
so that
to.
we can address them all. But I'm going to get to one about formality, I guess, through the contract. And the question is, where is a project referee written into the contract?
It's written right in the beginning. It's part of every contract is going to have a dispute resolution process that describes how you're going to handling adjudication, mediation, and arbitration and litigation. And there's a section in the dispute resolution process that describes the role of the project referee and incorporate that in the contract. So when a contractor is bidding, he's fully aware of it. So that documentation goes right into the tender document and right into the contract that's signed, and it describes the activities of the project referee
Okay.
for both parties.
All right, great. And so along with that, similarly, are the fees suggested for the project referee, or is there, I guess, a fee structure suggested for the project referee? Is it hourly or by case by case?
I think it's typically done on an hourly basis. The referee is paid on it. It's an hourly basis, and it's not on a case by case basis. A dispute, obviously, once a dispute gets initiated, there'll be a discussion about the value, the number of hours that are expected to be spent. Parties will already have agreed at the hourly rate. There also may be a monthly retainer to ensure that if you've got a long contract, that the project referee is retained and available throughout the course of the contract. So it's hourly, but through the course of the discussion of the dispute, there'll be a discussion about how many hours are required to deal with this specific dispute.
Okay, great. So here's a question near the top, and I find that there's two or three different questions here. I think they're trying to make sense, Rick, between the different options. Like you say, there's many tools in the toolbox. But this question is, what is the difference between using a referee and mediation? When parties chose a mediator with qualifications that you mentioned for a referee, what would be the difference?
I think I touched on it in my presentation. Mediator honestly doesn't care what's in your contract. They do not care. Their job is to maneuver the parties into the position where they have a dispute, where they agree to solve their dispute. The mediator probably doesn't have technical background, and it doesn't make any difference. They don't care, quite frankly. Their job is to position people into making a decision, whereas a referee's job is to look at the contract, look at the facts of the issue, review all the facts associated with the issue, and issue a recommendation that's granted it's non-binding, as a mediator's is, but it's an informed decision versus a mediator basically says at the end of the day, you know, I couldn't get the parties together. So it's completely different in the sense that the referee is actually an informed party and is actually trying to get to the root of the matter and provide an informed, educated, qualified opinion with respect to the dispute. So that's where there's a major difference between a mediator, and a project referee.
Okay, and then along the same lines, and again, a lot of this information came through on your presentation today, Rick, but the comparison now is, you know, why would a contractor use a referee versus a adjudicator?
Uh, with the issue with an adjudication is there could be some overlap. The problem you would have with an adjudication process, it is that the if you can't agree, or if the owner doesn't agree to the adjudicator that you wish to use as a contractor, then ODAC's going to appoint, and that adjudicator may have no or limited experience. I would never say no, but limited experience in this specific area of your dispute. So that's the advantage of having a referee. You essentially have I'll call it an adjudicator type of person that's involved in your project from the beginning, that's respected by both sides, and both sides understand that the person they're going to put their dispute forward to for consideration and a recommendation is qualified to deal with that dispute. So that's why a contractor should think that a referee is probably a less risky way to deal with disputes versus going to an adjudication. Adjudication obviously is better in the sense that you get a binding decision if that's what you're wishing to achieve, and you're confident that you're going to get a positive judgment from an adjudicator based on your case. Then maybe you do go to adjudication and skip the project referee process.
Great. Okay, Rick, here's a question from Frank. And you did mention in your presentation that the use of the referee process would be written into the contract. So there's a slight spin with this question. So the question is, Rick, is it common to see a clause put in the tender documents for a project referee, which we think we know the answer to, but or is this something that can be mutually agreed upon after the fact? So, you know, let's give the example where maybe the referee process is not part of the contract, but later on, when there is an issue to be resolved, people want to resort to the referee process. Is that something that can be brought in after?
Uh, I see that as a contract changer, same as any other change. You would have to put forward a process. Um, I'll call it a contract amendment, change order that says, hey, okay, both parties agree that we are going to incorporate a project referee, you know, in the middle of a project. And here's how the project referee will work. Here's the terms and conditions, similar to what you would normally lay out at the beginning. And if both parties agree to the call it the contract amendment that allows for a project referee to be created during a contract, then there's nothing wrong with that. I think that would be a challenging way to go, but I think it's theoretically possible. Yes.
Okay. Rick, as we're talking here, I'm just not sure if we're still showing your last slide with your contact information. You may want to try and show that. But if not, you know, we can certainly have the ability to get in touch with Rick.
Can you see
Um,
it now?
um, I do not at this point, but I'll just carry on with some
Okay.
questions here.
Okay.
Um, and the question is, are the fees for the referee paid by the owner, the contractor, or both?
They're split 50-50. They're
Okay.
paid typically they're paid through the contractor as part of a progress payment. but the cost itself is split 50-50 between the owner and the contractor. And as same as an adjudication, it's going to be a 50-50 split.
Okay. And then we have a question right at the bottom of the list. An AFP contract model typically has what is called an independent certifier that performs a phase of completion certification role and sometimes acts as a referee for the disputes related to changes. Would you recommend expanding this role or have a referee for two distinct roles?
I guess I'm not that familiar with the AFP model, but and I do know the independent certifier has a role in terms of phase completion certifications. I would suggest that that is a little different. Certifier is just going to be looking at the state of the project primarily, and are you complete, and what the status of the work is, versus being necessarily the same type of person that you would be looking at to review and provide a recommendation on a dispute. I see them as being different. One is more of a, I'll call it a quantity surveyor type of role versus a dispute resolution type of person that's going to dig into the issue. So that would be, I don't know a lot about the AFP contract model, but I believe that this would be two separate and distinct roles.
Okay, great. Well, listen, we're a minute up to the top of the hour, and I think we're going to conclude the Q&A session at this point. There was an ask, Rick, if whether your presentation copy could be available, and if you would be willing to do so to share your
Sure,
slide deck.
sure, that'd be no problem.
Yeah, okay. Because I know with some of the content in that presentation, some of the questions we did not get to, I'm sure many of you can find the information there. So at this point, I'd like to thank Rick for coming on today with OPW Connects. It was a great topic. We had a full house, over 100 people today. So obviously there's a lot of interest in this topic. Just a reminder to the attendees that the presentation today was recorded. It will take us a little bit of time just to get things uploaded to our YouTube channel, but you'll have an opportunity to review and or rewind and play back today's presentation. So thank you again, Rick, for
No
your
problem.
participation. Great.
Happy to help.
Yeah, great job. And with that, I'm going to sign off. I'm just like to ensure that you guys follow us. If you're not a member of OPWA, we'd love to have you join our group. But you can go to our website, to any of our social media platforms, and you can get notice of what's up and coming, including our 2 additional webinars that we have in April. And with that, I'd like to say thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed today. Enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the week. Bye for now.